Hey everybody, chapter 13. Trying to make this one video, we'll see. So we're talking about the muscular system. Let's get started. The muscular system is functioning in movement of the body, all the things that you can do: sit, stand, speak, spin, ice skate, jet ski. But the other thing is the muscular system is super important to moving materials through systems. So our digestive system has very well developed smooth muscle. So the stomach is contracting, the esophagus, the small intestine, large intestine. We also have smooth muscle in our urethra and our bladder. So super important. Even our arteries and veins have muscle, smooth muscle, to help essentially move the blood through the body. Okay, super important. Our muscles also help. Skeletal muscle helps move the blood in our veins back up to our heart because it's moving away from gravity. It's easy to push blood out to the body, but it's not always so hard to get it back to the heart from, let's say, our feet or our ankles. All right, so 3 types of muscle tissue. You might remember that I mentioned these in our chapter that included tissues, but we have smooth, cardiac, and skeleton, or skeletal. And when we break it down, just like we have with our chondrocytes and astrocytes and osteocytes, the basic unit that is called the muscle cell is a myocyte. So let's go ahead and compare and contrast the 3 muscle types. Smooth muscle is going to be in your internal organs. All your internal organs, including your blood vessels, except the heart. So, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, your urinary bladder, your urethra, all those things, including arteries and veins, okay? If I were to look at these underneath the microscope, essentially they look kind of like a little bit like squashed looking cells. They have a nucleus. But other than that, you're not going to see any stripes. It doesn't call out to you that, oh my gosh, I'm skeletal muscle or I'm cardiac muscle. It just sort of looks like, honestly, it looks like a raw piece of meat. I'm going to say it. When you eat meat, though, you're likely eating skeletal muscle unless you eat organ meat. All right, like stomach. Okay. All right, so you're going to hear these terms: involuntary and voluntary muscle. Voluntary, you voluntarily move it. I'm moving. Talking. Blinking is a weird thing, but anyway, involuntary, you don't have to think about. When I eat, I don't have to think, like make my food go down my esophagus. It just goes because of rhythmic muscle contractions. Okay? All right, cardiac, super cool muscle. Take a look. Not only does it have a striped appearance, and that's going to tell you that it's very, very efficient at contraction. That's all you need to know about that. You're also going to see that it's branched. Where'd my cursor go? A little bit hard to see here, but essentially the story is where you see this little stripe, that it is likely branching and connecting to 2 different other cells. So in the heart, again, a involuntary muscle, when a electrical impulse is being sent, it very quickly perpetuates across the heart. When we get to the cardiac cycle and so on, we will talk about the SA node, the AV node, pacemaker cells. But essentially, cardiac muscle is designed to rapidly move the signal across so that other cells are reacting, A, and B, it's self-perpetuating. So it's interesting in that the heart can keep beating and keep beating and keep beating and not really have to be under brain control. So, all right. So striped and branched and involuntary, and it only makes up the heart. Okay. Next, skeletal muscle. Okay. I've been a vegetarian for most of my life, but I definitely remember picking at my food as a kid. And chicken was one of those things, right? So you get a piece of fried chicken, and then, I don't know, you're bored, you don't like it. When I was a kid, kids didn't get to talk that much. The parents always talked. So, I would essentially start peeling my chicken. Okay? So when you hear shredded chicken, the reason why chicken can be shredded is it is a skeletal muscle. And skeletal muscles are very well organized in big groups, smaller groups, even smaller groups, and you have these strands, okay, or fibers. So when we take a look at the cells, the fibers, now you can't look at that when you're peeling your Kentucky Fried Chicken, but when you're looking at a microscope, you can see these very, very straight and striped appearance of the skeletal muscle. What is it really good at? It's very good at contracting. Contracting, relaxing, contracting, relaxing. It's very quick and it's voluntary movement. So you are in control of those muscles. Of course, there's a lot of, cell biology going on behind the scenes, but essentially it's very good at coordinating the effort to cause the muscle to contract or relax. Okay, so that's the big thing to know about skeletal muscles. They're voluntary, they're very well designed, they're not branched, but you see that there's going to be these repeated units that are going to be very good at shortening the muscle and lengthening the muscle. All right. Just like with our other systems, we were talking about the function of the skeletal muscles, or the function of, so we're going to focus on the skeletal muscles. So your skeletal muscles, so important to support your body. So as we get older and we're not doing any ab work or any back work and we're slouching around, we're sitting in front of a computer, we lose that support. So why do we have backaches? Because we've lost that strength of our muscles. So we have to keep that strength of the muscles to increase the support of the body. We know that skeletal muscles move our bones, other structures. Okay, that's not hard. The third one, maintenance of a constant body temperature. Have you ever realized that, or noticed, if you go work out and then later you're touching your arms, oh, I'm kind of hot. Well, essentially, we know that the heat generated from our muscles are going to help keep our body at a constant body temperature. It may be hot or cold outside, but essentially, to keep us warm, I'm thinking specifically in the winter, we have the generation of this energy from our muscles moving, and so it helps keep the body warm. All right, next, movement of fluids in the cardiovascular and lymphatic systems. Have you noticed that as people get older, that they have swollen ankles, and so that can be essentially a lot of interstitial fluids and lymphatic fluids, and so we might do massage, we might put on special compression socks and so on. Well, essentially our veins are getting helped along with our skeletal muscle from our legs, and that is going to help the blood get back to the heart. So someone may have swollen ankles because essentially the blood is not able to reaccumulate some of those fluids and get it back to the heart. So it's super important for our skeletal muscles to help the veins get the blood back to the heart. Okay, the last one, protection of our internal organs and stabilization of joints. So sure, joints. I've got a right knee thing. I know how I did it. I definitely know how I did it. I am doing some strength training. I'm doing planks and I'm doing things, right? You're doing things essentially to support the knee. So the knee is going to be better protected if we have strong quads, right? So it's super important for us to keep in shape so that we are better able to protect our joints, so we're not overusing or misusing joints. Imagine all the times that someone's going to physical therapy when it could have been prevented all along by essentially keeping our muscles in good shape. Stabilization of joints. So yeah, if our muscles are deconditioned, then we're not really going to be stabilizing those joints, so we use them in ways to compensate for that and end up hurting ourselves. Okay, let's take a look at this design of the skeletal muscle. It's super interesting. So I told you I used to shred my chicken. You can do this if you want, but here's essentially the story. You have a big, huge muscle fascicle. Okay, that fascicle is a bundle of what we call skeletal muscle fibers. So you have a fascicle, then you had a fiber. The fiber is connected by some connective tissue, and so it's kind of just keeping it really well organized. Okay, the fascia You might have heard of fascia, like if you are just really tight, you might have heard of like myofascial release. Well, the fascia is a connective tissue that covers your muscles and extends to become a tendon. So sometimes our fascia gets really kind of locked up, it gets really tight, and it's going to affect how your muscles are working. So you might end up with some muscle strain, muscle pain, from that tight fascia. All right, so the last thing, small fluid-filled sacs called bursa, often can be found between the tendons and bones, provide cushion lubrication. So we see that this is all part of our fascicle. So let's take a look at a picture of this. Think about chicken and shredding your chicken. So you see, they're essentially taking a look at a muscle likely of what looks like the bicep. So you've got the muscle. So there's the bicep muscle. And then you see that it actually has smaller bundles within that muscle. And there's connective tissue around the bundle. So essentially we have the whole muscle is our fascicle. And then we have these muscle fibers. And then if we magnify just one of these muscle fibers, then we start to see that there's smaller units that look a lot like the muscle fibers are to the fascicle, and these are what we call the myofibrils. The myofibrils are essentially the microscopic part of the muscle cell. So you got bundles within bundles within bundles, and it really looks like there's a bundle within that, and that's how the muscle is designed. Okay, when we think about muscles as well, particularly if you are working out, our muscles often work in pairs. So essentially, you have a muscle, for example, on either side of your upper arm. As you lift something up, maybe you're lifting up a book or you're lifting up a box, and you're contracting that bicep muscle. So that bicep muscle is contracted, but we have to relax its pair. Okay, we have to relax the underside of our arm, so that's the tricep, so that we have the length, if you will, or the stretching of that muscle so that our bicep can contract and do its work. So we have an agonist. So in this example, my bicep is my agonist. It's the prime mover. It's doing most of the work. And the tricep essentially is relaxing so that I can use that bicep. So they work in pairs, the agonist and the antagonist. So the agonist is doing most of the work. Now there are times when maybe you're doing overhead presses, or I'm thinking tricep kickbacks. And so essentially you are now contracting the tricep, which is the agonist, and you're relaxing the bicep. So you can do some motions like that. Another really, popular pair that we're familiar with, muscle group, would be our quads and our hamstrings. So again, two muscle groups, one on the front side of your upper leg and one on the back side, working in pairs, the agonist and antagonist. And again, that can change depending on what motion is occurring. Okay, so next up, there are some muscles you need to know. So starting around the eye, orbicularis oculi. Okay, eyes, oculus, ocular, orbicularis oris, which is your mouth. So these are the muscles around your mouth, called the kissing muscle. As we go over here, the masseter. Okay, so the masseter is involved with chewing and clenching your teeth. So you might have had a really tight masseter muscle from clenching your jaws. Deltoids, these are essentially on your upper arms, forming part of that shoulder. And you go on down. Pecs, so your pectoralis major. Here, essentially your upper chest. It brings your arm forward and across your chest. So moving this way. Serratus anterior. So these are along, not quite the obliques, but definitely in a more diagonal plane. So it's essentially kind of under your arm, but on your chest. It pulls the scapula forward, as in pushing and punching. So thinking about this motion. Of course, we had our biceps and triceps. The rectus abdominis is what we would call the six-pack. Your quads, quadricep femoris, then are these muscles of the front of the leg. And there are a few other ones there. The traps on the back side looks like a big triangle. So